and I'm just going to guess, okay, this is not a criticism by any means. There's probably not a big ratio of people in here that has ever roped a calf in the pasture, in the brush, or in the trees or something like that. I mean, you got to kind of cowboy for a living to do that. Let me try to explain the very first time. Leroy Evans is already smiling. I haven't even started yet because he knows what's coming. If the first time you tear out across the pasture, the boss says, rope them. And you tear out across the pasture trying to rope a calf. Let me try to maybe illustrate how that goes. If you would like to take a cotton ball and try to knock a hummingbird out of the air from 14 feet away, that's about how hard it is to get your first calf roped out in the pasture. Maybe try to take a bowling ball and try to knock down a bee with it. We were on the Rockerbee Ranch, and, I had roped in the arena. Guys, let me tell you what. There is as big a difference in roping in the arena and roping in the pasture as there is night and day. So we're sitting there, and, when you're gathering cattle, man, you've always got one. You got that one cow that's always trying to turn back, and she doesn't ever have that little calf that follows her. She's got that calf that belongs to her that's been way out there a quarter of a mile, way out here a quarter of a mile, and he's got a permanent 9 in his tail. Okay, so we're getting there to the pens, and we're trying to push everything in, and I mean, as Murphy would have it, they are right there at the back. And right as they're fixing to go through the gate, we're like, yeah, we're great cowboys. They turn, and there's nothing that we can do to stop them. And the wagon boss is mad. Rope them! So me and 2 other cowboys, we tear off. Well, they were ahead of me. They went after the cow because she was easier. She was a big old fat thing, and she couldn't run very fast. She was just kind of loping off out through there. Well, they took the cow and yelled, get the calf! Ooh, boy. I was a real cowboy now. Boy, I leaned forward over that horse, and boy, I'm whooping and a spurring to it. I was on Hanos, so we were going about this fast. No, not really. I was on the red colt that time. But anyway, you got to be here for a long time to get some of these things. And so, anyway, but there's so much going on. I mean, it's like juggling 4. See? Whoever just called me Junior, we gonna have words. My hind end is so hot, it melted the connection. That's what that is. So anyway, I'm tearing out across there, and you're trying to watch this calf, which is like a bumblebee trying to follow a bumblebee. And I mean, it's darting through the brush, and I'm darting through the brush, and I'm going, and I'm trying to swing a rope, and I ain't made it from here to Trevor to this deal. So finally, I got tired of swinging the rope. Then you're diving through the brush and everything like that, and the brush takes the rope out of your hand. You got to coil it up, and your horse is looking back at you like, are we going to do this or what? But really what happened is I just loped up there and I threw a 30-foot loop. It landed right on the ground. 35 feet from the calf. "35 minutes later, that calf has stopped and is looking up at me, asking me to rope it. With its tongue hanging out, we are 4.5 miles and in 3 different pastures. And so No, we were still in the same pasture, and it wasn't 35 minutes. It felt like 35 minutes. But anyway, I chased that calf, and I threw so many loops. I had to switch to my left hand because my right arm wouldn't lift anymore. And so anyway, finally, this calf is seriously, I'm about to kill this calf, okay? Now, I was really, really young, and, it's your first time, you get excited, and common sense kind of throws out the window, and so it's 180 degrees. And so anyway, this calf by now is seriously just trotting. So I just kind of ride up there, look around, take one swing, throw it from here to there, and missed. Yeah! Dallied. You got to turn off a little bit, kind of ride off. And then I thought, you know what would a real calf roper do? So I bail off my horse, and I run to it, and I flank it, and it hits the ground, and it scares my horse, and my horse ran off. But I've got a calf. So I hear clang, 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 clang. About 10 minutes later, here comes my dad with my horse in the trailer. And he's going along, and he pulls up, and I've got this calf tied and everything like that. I said, man, that horse, Dad, he was bucking, and man, I come off, but in air, I roped that calf, and I caught it, but my horse ran off. He goes, I was watching from right over there. I saw everything that happened. I said, is it okay if we tell everybody that's what happened? He said, yeah, that'll be fine. I was on the Rocker Bee when Dad first moved out there. After I graduated from high school and tried college for about 3 semesters, then I went to the Carrizo Springs at San Pedro Ranch. Left there, got a job on the Rocker Bee. And I'll never forget, I was in town one day, and they said, oh, Kevin's back, blah, blah, blah. They said, what are you doing? I said, I got hired on at the Rocker Bee. And they go, you did? I was like, well, yeah. And they were like, well, you're not that great of a cowboy. And well, what makes you so good that you got hired on out there? It's hard to get on out there. The Rocker Bee about 3 months ago was in the Western Horseman. This is a big ranch owned by the Scottish Rite Hospital for Crippled Children, and it's not easy to get a cowboying job anyway, much less on a big outfit and everything like that. And I guarantee you, I probably was not worthy in their eyes to be a hand out there on the Rocker Bee. But you know what I was? I was Cowboy Worthy. How was I worthy of getting a job on a big ranch that every cowboy wanted? I tell you the story of roping the calf to tell you that I am no top hand with a rope. I can catch every now and then. I went out to Phil Spence's one day, and he was driving the little mule, pulling the little sled, and I was on Fiona, and I was walking up, and he's like, I thought you said you couldn't rope. He's like, you're not pretty at all, but you can catch. That's how I rope. I'm not very pretty at all, but I can catch. I wasn't very handy with a rope, so how did I get the job? If a horse farted too loud, I fell off until I was probably 24. I was not a horseman. I could not shoe a horse in one day. You're supposed to shoe a horse every 6 weeks. I did that because that's how long it took me. I shoed all the time. I don't want to see how Doug does like 20 a day. I didn't have fancy tack. I didn't have fancy shaps. I didn't have the fancy hat or the 60-foot rope or anything like that. I knew nothing about bovine care. If it was up and breathing, I figured it was pretty good. If it was dead or laying down and not breathing, I figured that was bad. That was the extent of my veterinarian knowledge. So how did I get the job? Why would they hire this kid that can't rope that well? He can't ride that well. He doesn't fit the part with the big fancy everything. He's not going to be the poster child for Western Horseman. He's not going to be the poster child for the 4 Sixes Ranch or anything like that. The only thing I knew about a windmill was where to put the gas in it, I thought. What I'm saying is I didn't know anything. What made me worthy to get that job? I had 3 things that separated me from a lot of people. 3 qualifications. And everybody out there on the Rocker Bee had witnessed all 3 of those qualifications. And it's the reason that I got the job. I had Cowboy Worth. Now, what is Cowboy Worth? Cowboy Worthy. We're buying a new mic. Cowboy Worthy means wanting what a cowboy is. Think about that. If you want to be a cowboy, you've got to do what cowboys do. You got to want what they are. Think about the old Willie Nelson song. My heroes have always been cowboys. And that was true for me. I grew up idolizing Josie Wales. I grew up on John Wayne. Man, when Lonesome Dove came out, tell me, men, that every single one of you didn't want to be Gus. There's like 3 people that have said that they wanted to be Call. I don't know why. He had no sense of humor. Worked his butt off. Anyway, but think about that. Did you want to be a cowboy? That's what I wanted. I wanted to be a man that looked fear in the face and did it anyway. That's what a cowboy was to me. He wasn't afraid of anything. They got on bulls, they got on rank horses, they went out there with mean cows. It didn't matter what they did. I never saw a cowboy that was scared. I'm not saying that he was never scared. He just looked it in the face and just did it anyway. I wanted to be that kind of man. I wanted to be a man that stood for something besides myself. I wanted to be somebody that somebody looked up and kind of, just by looking at him and being around him for a little while, knew that he stood for something. That was important to me. I wanted to be a man that was respected for who he was, not for what he had. Think about that. Do you want to be respected for who you are? Or to be admired because you've got some nice toys or a big house or a fancy horse? I wanted to be respected for who I was. I wanted to be a man that did the right thing even when nobody was watching. To be a cowboy, there's nobody out there saying, okay, I need you to do this and I need you to do that and make sure you get this done and get this done and get this done. It doesn't happen. You got to be out there and you got to feed. You got to get up in the mornings and go fix that hole in the fence because you're the only one that knows about it. You've got to be able to do the right thing. It doesn't matter if anybody's looking or not. I wanted to be that kind of man. A man that wasn't afraid to do something. To be a man that stood for something. To be respected for who I was. I wanted to be a man strong enough to do what I was asked to do. I wanted to be a man that could be trusted to be there in a pinch. Are you that kind of man? And you know what? I'm not going to be politically correct. And I hope you understand, I'm not just talking to the men. Are you that kind of person? These were the things that songs were written about, right? The cowboy legend. It wasn't about roping. It wasn't how well you rode. It didn't matter if you bounced when you trotted. That doesn't matter. These are the things that songs were written about and the stuff of legends and tall tales and stories. Tell me that every one of you didn't at some point in your life want to be a cowboy that looked fear in the face and did it anyway. To be a cowboy that stood for something besides himself. Wanted to be a cowboy that was respected for who he was, not what he had. To be a cowboy that did the right thing, even if nobody was watching. To be a cowboy that was strong enough to do any job that he was given. Tell me that you don't still to this day want to be a person that could be trusted to be there in a pinch. Is that you? Because a cowboy's worth is in his want. I wanted to be a cowboy. I desired it. I went after it. I would do whatever it took. And it started with wanting to be that cowboy. The second thing that I had, a cowboy's worth, is that I was willing. They had seen it time and time again. I worked out there for years for free, helping my dad each and every day that I was there after school, during the summers. I was willing to do what a cowboy did. I was willing to go against the flow. Think about that. Does a cowboy just go along with everybody else? No, I think the very definition of a cowboy is willing to go against the flow, because I guarantee you, if you're a cowboy, you ain't in it for the money. I guarantee you ain't in it for the money. You're not in it for the possessions. I chased cows. I didn't chase money. I made $750 a month and worked 7 days a week. Now, not to say that they made me work 7 days a week, but I mean, a ranch job is not a 9-to-5 job. You don't get up in the morning, well, I guess I better go to work now. And no, it's daylight till dark. It's everything that the world is not. I was willing to put my own comfort at the bottom of the to-do list. Think about that. You know what? One of the problems with this world today is most people are too dang comfortable. You want to be a cowboy? You better get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's just the way it is. I was willing to learn and listen from people that had salt instead of fame and money. What do I mean by that? Man, I looked up to Jim Ed Basham. I looked up to Paul Weatherby. I looked up to Ralph Hager. I looked up to Antonio Gallegos and Zeferino and Tomas. Those are the guys that I looked up to. I didn't care about J.P. or whatever his name is, and, you know, all these famous actors. Well, Robert Duvall, I kind of looked up to him. That was Gus. I looked up to people that had salt and sand, not fame and fortune. I was willing. I wanted to be a cowboy. That's what a cowboy's worth is measured by your want. I was willing to do whatever it took. You know what? The true strength of a man, and I want you to listen right here. Just in case, and especially you younger kids, listen to this. The true strength of a man is not found in his might or his muscles, but in his willingness. This strength is easily measured between the point when he decides to start and when he decides to quit. Think about that. True strength is measured between the point that you decide to do something and the point that you decide to quit. And you know what? Today, people aren't very strong. They're fickle. They don't finish what they start. They come up with a good idea, and the second it gets hard, they're done. You can't do that and be a cowboy. True strength is measured between the point when you decide to start and when you decide to quit. And it takes strength to be a cowboy. It ain't about roping. It ain't about riding. It ain't about knowing the exact dosage of 7-way and all this other stuff. It's not about that. You can learn that stuff. That comes from the outside in. Somebody, Doc Walters, can teach you about all that. But you know what? You can't really teach somebody want to. You can't really teach somebody willingness. It's got to come from inside of you. The third reason that I got that job was because I wasn't afraid of work. I wasn't afraid to do the job. A cowboy's work is quitting when the job is done, not when you get tired. Think about that. I mean, if the fence is down or there's a fire out there, I remember one time we were fighting a brush fire on the Rocker Beat, and I stepped across an oil field pipeline that was running right through the fire. I wanted to quit. I didn't want to get blowed up, but I stayed there. That was kind of dumb. But think about that. Quitting is when the job is done, not just when you get tired. Getting comfortable with uncomfortable, like I said. Man, you got to work to be a cowboy. If you're afraid of work, don't sign up for that. It's hard work. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable. A cowboy's work is when he understands that the quickest way to do something is to do it right. Now, I will say this about a cowboy. A cowboy will spend 42 days to figure out how to do a 30-minute job easier. It's just part of our nature. But once we figure it out, it works. A cowboy's work is hot. It's cold. It's windy. It's dusty. It's long and it's hard and it's rough and it's dry and it's wet and it's miserable and it's exciting. And you know what? It is worth every single second of it, guys. It is. Do you have cowboy worth? You got to want it. You got to be willing. And you got to be able to do the work. In 2 Thessalonians 1:11. 2 Thessalonians 1:11. Paul says this. With this in mind, we constantly pray for you, that our God may count you worthy of his calling. We pray that our God may count you worthy of his calling. Now here's the million-dollar question. Are you worthy of God's calling? Are you worthy to ride for the long X? Are you worthy to ride right next to Jesus Christ in the pastures that he has called us to gather? Are you worthy? Because I hear a lot of people with big old butts, excuses. Well, I'd like to be a Christian, but I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. You know what? Are you worthy? I say that true Christians are. What does it mean to be cowboy worthy? What is God looking for that will make him count us as worthy? He's looking for his Son in you. We have to want to be like Jesus. The Bible calls us to be Christ-like, and you have to want that. You know what? A lot of people, they want salvation, but they don't want to act anything like Jesus acted. They don't want to live that kind of life. If you want to be counted as worthy, you got to want to be like Jesus. And I tell you what, there has never been another man as manly and as tough as Jesus Christ that walked this earth. We should all desire to be like him. Man, he wasn't scared of nothing. Hey, he didn't care who you were. He would tell it to you straight. It didn't matter if government or tough guy or a guy that had a legion of demons in him. Boy, he stood up to everybody. And he also healed the sick. He also cared for people. He also washed his disciples' feet. He also died on a cross. You got to want to be like Christ. To be counted as worthy, we must want to do what Jesus told us to do. To look fear in the face and do it anyway. How many times did Jesus say that? Do not be afraid. You got to want to stand for something besides yourself. Don't look out for number one. Look out for your neighbor. Let Jesus take care of you. You take care of everybody else. You got to want that. if you want to be called worthy by the Almighty, to be respected for who you are, not what you have. Jesus told the Pharisees, he said, man, you look great on the outside, but inside you're full of filth and rot. You got no respect for me. Be respected for who you are, not what you have. You gotta want to do the right thing, even if no one is watching. Jesus said that. He said, well, you pray good prayers when everybody's watching, but then, when you're by yourself, you don't ever care about anything. You got to want to be like him. You got to want to do what he told you to do. You got to want to be a man strong enough to do the job that God called you to do. To be the man that God called you to be. You got to want it. If you don't want it, you're not worthy. It's that plain and simple. You got to want to be a man that can be trusted to be there in a pinch. Jesus said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, didn't he? He'll always be there in a pinch. Doesn't mean you won't get bucked off. Doesn't mean that you won't go through hard times. As a matter of fact, like I preached on a couple of weeks ago, Jesus promised his disciples 3 things. He said that they would be absurdly courageous, absurdly happy, and in a constant wreck. If you don't want that, you're not worthy. You got to want to be like Christ. It's that simple. You have to be willing to be like him. To be counted as worthy, we must be willing to do what Jesus told us to do. To go against the flow and put our faith in things that are eternal, not money or possessions. Are you willing to do that? Sell everything you own and follow me, and then you will inherit the kingdom of God. And the rich man turned away and walked away because he knew he could not do it. What are you willing to give up for the cause? What are you willing to give up to be a cowboy for Christ? And if it is anything different than I am willing to give up everything, you're not worthy. It won't happen. I'm sorry. There is not another way in. You're either all in or you're not in at all. To be worthy, you have to go all in. You have to put your own comfort at the bottom of the to-do list. Quit worrying about how you feel all the time. Oh, you're having a bad day? So? That doesn't give you a right to go treat people like crap. Oh, you're sad? That doesn't mean that you can't help somebody else out. Quit worrying about so much about you and start worrying about him and your neighbor. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Think about that. You got to be willing to be Christ-like. You got to be willing to know that Jesus taught us that having salt is more important than having status. Now, for you that ain't cowboys, man, a man that has salt means something. He's got gravel. He's got sand. That's a good thing. Is that you? Would you like it to be you? It can be. You just got to want to be like Christ. You've got to be willing, because I know a lot of people may want to be like Christ, but they do things unwillingly. They do it begrudgingly. They moan and they complain all the time. Look around. Is it you? Are you constantly praising God and being thankful and being content? Or does most of what comes out of your mouth a complaint in some form or fashion? Because you cannot be willing if you're complaining. Those are the exact opposites. And lastly, we have to want to do the work that God sent His Son down here to show us how to do. To be counted as worthy, we must want and be willing to work. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, you know what? We are saved by grace through faith, not by works, lest any man should boast. But do not forget that James said, show me a faith without works, and I'll show you a dead faith. I'm not saying that you have to work to be saved. You work because you are saved. That's what that means. Are you tough enough to be a cowboy for Christ? Some of you haven't been. But you can start today. I don't care if you work on a ranch. I don't care if you can rope. I don't care if you can ride. I don't care if you got a wade or an association tree, or you put rubber on your saddle horn, or you rope with mule hide, or a 30-foot rope or a 60-foot rope. I don't care what you are. I want you to be a cowboy or a cowgirl for Christ, and you got to want it. You got to be willing, and you got to want to and willing to do Jesus' work. What is that? Let me give you a little bit of an illustration here. I hope you're able to follow me. Church people quit when they get tired. Jesus' cowboys quit when they get to heaven. Think about that. Church people quit whenever they get tired. Jesus' cowboys quit when they get to heaven. This is no part-time job. You sign up for this for life. Church people seek comfort. Jesus' cowboys are comfortable with uncomfortable. There was a guy that came up and said, "Hey, I want to follow you, Jesus." And Jesus says, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another guy says, "Hey, I'll come and follow you just as soon as my dad's dead." He said, "Let the dead bury their own dead. You come and follow me." And that guy walked away. Church people seek comfort. Jesus' cowboys are comfortable with uncomfortable. He sent out some disciples one time. He said, don't take anything with you the first time you go out. The second time he sent them out, he said, "Hey, if you got an extra cloak, you might sell it and buy you a sword." This ain't for sissies. There ain't going to be a single sissy in heaven. Because if you want to ride for this brand, an authentic Christianity, you're going to be absurdly happy, you're going to be constantly courageous, and you're going to be in a wreck all the time. And it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be worth it. Church people want quick. Jesus' cowboys want right. Church people look for easy. Jesus' cowboys look forward to eternity. Think about that. With this in mind, we constantly pray for you that our God may count you worthy of His calling. Are you worthy of His calling? It has nothing to do with outside stuff. It has to do with what comes from inside of you. You got to want it. You got to be willing to do it. And you got to be willing to do the work that He's called you to do. Nobody ever said it would be easy. And if you hear a preacher saying that it is easy, that if you come to Christ, all your problems are going to go away and everything's going to be Skittles and French kissing unicorns, and, we can all just skip la-di-da hand in hand and, give high fives. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen, guys. I see 300 people in here today that are here because God called them. Now, you got the first part right. I see people in Sublette County, Wyoming. I see people in Montrose, Colorado. I see people in Delta, Colorado. I see people in Canada. I see people in Australia. I see people in Peru, in Texas, in all across the United States and all across the world that are watching right now, listening on the radio. They're here today. They hear this message because God has called them. Now, are you worthy of that calling? That's up to you. You got to want it. You got to be willing. And you got to be a worker. Can you be counted as worthy? I hope so. Because I want to spend eternity with all of you. But there'll only be tough hombres and gals in heaven. And it will be worth it. You must want the Christian life. You must be willing to live a Christian life. And you must do the work of a Christian cowboy. There is no other way. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. And if you love me, you will obey what I have commanded." Please, guys. I ain't going to beg you. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And I'm going to hope that every single one of you's got salt and sand Let's go to God in prayer. God, we thank you so much for who you are. And God, I can see in some people's eyes today that you're reaching in and you're calling them worthy. God, help them to take a deep breath and get another hole in their belt. To saddle up and do your work, to want to be like you, to be willing to be like you, and to do the work that you have called each of us to do. And we can quit when we get to see you face to face, but until then, God, we're going to have the greatest strength that comes from you, that is the measurement between where we start and where we quit, and we're not going to quit until we slide head first into heaven. God, I thank you for the people that are here today that are accepting your call, and they're doing that with want, will, and work. God, be with us. Give us the strength that we need. Give us the wisdom. Give us the courage to do and be exactly who you've called us to be. And it's in your name that we pray. Amen.